Good morning, everyone. We're going to be talking about FHIR with transitions of care. This is our quick agenda. We have introductions. I will tell you who I am, and then we'll talk a little bit about the PACIO Project, and then the importance of transitions of care within post-acute care settings specifically. And then we'll talk a little bit about the process used to develop this IG, and then FHIR IG overview, and then the current status. And then we'll have some time for questions at the end. So I am your host. I am Alix Gates. I am at the MITRE Corporation. I am the project management lead for this Transitions of Care FHIR IG. I have a history in data science. I've been going into informatics. I've done some analysis, some policy analysis. So I've kind of been a little bit all over the place, but I'm focusing here on informatics and the PACIO transitions of care work. I also have a degree in data science from University of Chicago and also from University of Florida. This entire thing would not be possible without the team, so I want to give them kudos and shout outs at the beginning. We have Lorraine Whitkaiser, who's our sponsor, and then we have our leads, who are Terry O'Malley and Holly Miller, and then Chris Pugliese as well at Brightree. And then Elliot Silver is our tech team, and then the MITRE team as well. All right, the fun stuff. So what is PACIO? Who here has heard of the PACIO project? We have 1, 2, 3, 5, I'll say 5, 6 for the recording. We'll increase it a little bit. So the PACIO project is it's a collaborative effort to bring together the government, vendors, clinicians, many different stakeholders within the health information exchange environment for post-acute care specifically. Post-acute care, we look at it as five settings. It's SNFs, home health agencies, SNFs are skilled nursing facilities, inpatient rehabilitation facilities, home and community-based services, and I will get the fifth one and tell you because it's left me this morning. And the purpose of this PACIO project is to really bring all these different perspectives together. And then you can see on the slide here our different partners and the people that are engaged in this program. If you want to be one of them, please let me know. We are always open to taking more people and organizations. So this Transitions of Care IG is sponsored by the Patient Care Working Group. It is really an umbrella so the PACIO project has multiple IGs, and you'll see a couple of the other ones here on the slide. The Personal Function Engagement, ADI, and Standardized Medication Profile. So this Transitions of Care IG is really becoming the umbrella for the rest of those other IGs. So it's it's one of our newer use cases. We're really pulling from each of these other IGs that have been developed over time. You can see some of these, the Personal Function Engagement, the ADI ones are targeting STU2, so they're just a little bit more mature than this Transitions of Care IG. We are targeting ballot for STU1 either in July or January of 2025. So why is this important? The patient experience is complex. It involves many providers across acute and post-acute care settings. So on this graphic, you can see on the left-hand side, Miss Smith and her daughter, and you can see all the different types of providers that are engaged in her care. You have hospitals, Hospital B, Hospital A, so not even just one hospital. You have a home and community-based services. You have skilled nursing facilities, and each of these have their own information that they're collecting and developing and hopefully theoretically sharing. They all each have assessment information as well, at least for the post-acute care settings, that are getting sent to Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to assess the quality of the care being delivered. And so, but that data is not necessarily getting shared between the providers. So a provider that's collecting information at the SNF is not necessarily sharing that information with the home health agency as they're getting transitioned. This can create poor communication across providers, can create issues for the patient. It can make medication discrepancies. It can mean that there's a high reliance on the patient recall during periods of high stress, and especially with some patients who might have dementia or other inability to communicate, it just adds stress during these already large times. It can also increase the cost and provider burden. And then one more statistic for you, nearly half of these patients require a post-acute care setting after hospitalization. So we have, there's a MedPAC report in 2024 this year that was a report to Congress on home health agencies, SNFs, and inpatient rehabilitation facilities. And you can see that most of the patients that had to have a PAC setting, PAC services went to a home health agency. That was about 2.8 million Medicare beneficiaries and cost about $16.1 billion in 2022. And then for SNFs, that was roughly 1.3 million Medicare beneficiaries, costing about $29 billion. So this is not small potatoes that we're talking about here. So the FHIR IG itself, what are we doing? We have a consensus-based process used to develop this IG. So we have representatives from each of these different provider types. We have nurses, doctors, nurse practitioners, and they came together once a week to give their perspective on what of the data element library and the PAC assessments that I spoke about a little bit about earlier, what of those pieces of information are the most important for what they need to be able to go from one patient to another, and to be able to determine, can I take this patient on A, and then how do I take care of them the second that they're at my doorstep. And so this IG is a combination of all of those different perspectives. And so as the patient comes to, let's say a patient is had their knee replaced, and they are changing over to a physical therapist, that physical therapist can know what the nurses were thinking, what the dietitians were thinking, what the pharmacists were thinking, and what was happening from each of those perspectives in that IG as it in the EHR as it comes to that patient. Our goal is to continue to expand. Our next step is behavioral health clinicians is the next role that we're aiming for, but if we're also aiming to expand this to additional roles, all the roles you see at the bottom of the slide. If you have anybody that would be interested in this type of work, please let us know. We would love to get them incorporated into this work because it's very, very important. As I mentioned earlier, this transitions of care IG, it encompasses many topics. So I mentioned earlier that we have it's pulling from the different IGs within PACIO. It's actually pulling from many different sources. So we do have the PACIO IGs for like advanced directives, functional status. We also are pulling from US Core. You can see that for allergies, immunizations, problems, procedures. We're pulling from device for like medical equipment, medication equipment. We have other, and then combination. Combination, you can think of social determinants of health for that social history. So this is really trying to be a broad, encompassing IG that can facilitate across different provider types. All right, so our current status. We had a transitions of care track at the Connect-a-thon in May in Dallas. We were able to successfully use the transitions of care IG to transition diagnoses, conditions, medications, orders, and single observation information from a skilled nursing facility to a home health agency. And this was specific for a post-stroke patient and then this was all done in preparation for a STU1 version of the standard. In this, you can see at the bottom, we had the test environment. We had 3 pieces of software that were connected and communicating. So we had the health data manager, which it would be an HIE, and then that was sharing data to a home health agency, pseudo EHR, and then a community pharmacy as well. And the data going into this HIE was from a SNF EHR. We are going to be at the July 2024 CMS Connect-a-thon, that's virtual. Our goal there is to incorporate additional partners and participants so that we can work together on this. Make it a little bit more real world. This is a bit of a busy slide, but bear with me for a moment. This is the use case that we used for the May Connect-a-thon and what we're going to be using going forward. On the left-hand side, you have just a high-level patient persona. we have their background, their medical history, and then their medication list. On the bottom, we have acronyms. Across the top, the rainbow color at the top, that is the different scenes from the use case that we were doing. And then on the bottom, you have a representation of the data flows as they're going through. I'm not going to go into detail for the first 2 scenes. We're going to start on scene 3, but just to set the stage, this is Betsy Smith-Johnson. If you're familiar with the PACIO Project, which a couple of you were, you're familiar. She's had a very, very busy medical history over time because she keeps getting used in these different scenarios. Poor woman. She had breast. She moved to Michigan to be closer to her son and her family. She was then diagnosed with breast cancer, and has been working at a neighborhood gym to go to improve her leg strength and her muscles after going through chemotherapy. As I said, she's had a storied life. So in scenes 1 and 2, Betsy had a stroke. So she was able to get care within 2 hours, which is phenomenal. She was able to get the treatment that she needed while she was at the hospital. They created diagnoses, a condition list. They created medications list. They created orders, different medical needs that she had. And then they pushed that data up to an HIE. After a few weeks, she was sent over to a SNF. And that's the scene 2, the orange slide that you can see there. And there she had a broad team working with her. She had some physical therapists, she had some occupational therapists, and they were all working together to make sure her care was good. She began to get better. She had a little bit of leftover right arm issues, a little weakness in the right arm. And so she was getting transferred to, which is where we come into the transfer of care, to a home health agency. On the bottom, you can see that she has the SNF team, she has her pharmacist, Betsy Smith-Johnson, and then her practitioner. So in this transition of care, she sent home via a wheelchair bus. You can see a little wheelchair bus in the middle there. All of her data is sent from the practitioner at the SNF. So we have on the top of the bottoms of this slide, we have the standardized medication profile client and then also the transitions of care client. Both of them are sending their information to the HIE, and then that is getting sent over to the home health agency. At the home health agency, she also has a large team of occupational therapists, speech language professionals, physical therapists, nursing team, and primary care team. And then lastly, to make sure that the medications are following her, we also have the information getting sent to the pharmacy, the community pharmacy. So from the hospital to the SNF to the community pharmacy, that her medical profile, her medication profile is getting shared so that the provider at each of those stages can see what medication she's taken and what medications have been taken off. All right, what are our next steps? Our next steps are balloting and expanding partners. As I mentioned, we tested the IG in May. We plan to do another testing in July for the CMS Connectathon. We're aiming for a STU 1 version of the standard in January or May of next year. We are hoping to expand the roles. So again, if you know anybody who wants to, any clinicians who want to be engaged in this work, please reach out. We're more than welcome to take them. And then our last goal is to incorporate systems and IT of additional partners, such as an HIE or an EHR health IT vendor, specific to PAC settings, but really anybody who'd be interested. Right now, how the IG is set up is we were able to use pseudo EHR for the SNF and the home health agency, and we'd like to incorporate the real world partners so that we can get a more real world experience and example. All right, any questions?
Thanks, Alex. Looks like a ton of really cool stuff. I'm curious. I know there were like rumblings in the past of with Terry O'Malley and those groups doing like CDA as a potential like similar transition of care. Can you speak to if you guys ever did like an analysis like why that like failed? Or I know it's a more complex standard, or maybe that's not something you guys did, but I'm really curious like the lessons learned from that and how this is like better positioned to solve the transition problem.
That is a great question. And I can take that back to our team to get you more information on that. Because I know we were doing an analysis. I don't know if that's complete yet. So I'll let you know. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your talk. So maybe my question is more like a philosophical question. When a use case needs a new FHIR IG, like when you make a decision that, oh, like this is when like existing IGs doesn't work, let's just create a new one.
When is the PACIO project deciding we don't have something that's was working? Yeah, so this one came to us from Doctors Terry O'Malley and Holly Miller. They had both, I know Terry had worked, and they're both clinicians, obviously being doctors. They're both clinicians and been working in this space for a while. And my understanding, I wasn't on the project at that time, but my understanding is they came to us directly and said, hey, we have this idea, we would like to work on this. And then we worked with them to build it out. And it's been, so this is now turning into the umbrella for these other IGs within PACIO.
I think my question was also a little bit philosophic, but I was busy as you were talking, trying to listen to what you were saying and trying to busily like dig through PACIO documents on my phone. And so I might have missed something important you said, or your talk might have caused me to miss something critical in the documents. But there's sort of this notion of like, when do you start a new IG? And then there's the notion of like, what strategy do you use to express a data set? So I didn't hear this clearly and didn't see it clearly. But it seems like the IG, or the work that you're doing, is more around sort of identifying the data set and matching it to use cases. But there isn't, I didn't see sort of the step to, you know, is the goal to create a single document out of that data set, and would that document be, you know, a FHIR composition, and how does it, and then the philosophic question is like, how does that compare to other kinds of summary documents? Is it a superset of something? Is the content different enough that it's really slightly to the left of something else? Do those questions make sense? Or?
Yes, they do. So it sounds like the first question is similar to the question over here of what was the purpose? Why did this IG get started, this use case get started? And then also kind of what...
Once you have that purpose, do you build on something else, or is this sort of defined as a separate thing? So I guess that's more right.
Okay. So for this one, we had been working on the other IGs, and I will say, I will have to talk a little bit to the team to make sure I get you the exact answer that you want. We'd been working on the personal function engagement IG and the ADI IG and a few others within the PACIO project. And we saw this one, as it's transformed over time, we kind of see this one as that umbrella that's connecting, being the connector between all these different IGs. Yeah.
This is the last.
Just curious, the reverse workflow. Any thoughts on integrating EMS? For example, you have an emergency of a patient going back from a SNF to a hospital. Any thoughts on that, or is that more future?
I'm trying to, that would be, I mean, that is part of our goal, is to be able to include the EMS transition as well. And that's why, I'll go back. We do have EMS on this slide, so we are looking for that role type to be incorporated into this conversation. And I am not an EMS professional, so I will admit that up front. And I will say that the the EMS professionals that I've worked with have mentioned use cases where it's not necessarily an emergency going from place to place, but it's just transportation, yeah. And in that scenario, the goal would be to have this information available for them as well.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.